Okay, so the death penalty. Chances are that most of you had some sort of reaction as soon as you heard me say that phrase, and it's understandable considering our exposure to the topic in our society today. From a young age, most of us are exposed to arguments or our loved ones' viewpoints on certain social issues, the death penalty being one of the most prominent of these. When we come of age and start to get our information from other sources, we come to realize that the media and news outlets are saturated with these social issues. Again, death penalty being one of the most prominent. So it's easy to understand that the death penalty itself is one of the most hotly contested issues in America's political climate, with pretty much everybody having some sort of viewpoint on it one way or the other, regardless of their background or belief system. So good morning, everyone. My name is Brendan Moore, and obviously our topic today is the death penalty. My goal here is not to sway your opinion one way or the other, but to provide you with enough information to make your own informed decision on the topic. In order to do so, we will explore three key areas: a history of the death penalty, a cost analysis, and we will also examine some common pro and con arguments utilized by the two opposing sides. Now, before I get any further, please note that the statistics and graphics in my presentation mostly come from the Death Penalty Information Center, and several of the moral arguments and some of those opposing viewpoints come from several literary works by experts in the criminal justice field that will be covered in my works cited. So in order to understand the issue of the death penalty, we must first examine its history. And to do so, we will start back on June 29, 1972, when the Supreme Court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional. Many people don't know that this actually occurred. And it's because the death penalty was reinstated just 4 years later in 1976, due to the Supreme Court's ruling being general and easy to circumvent by rewriting the death penalty statutes, which 35 states and the federal government did. Since 1976, when it became basically legal again, 1,431 people have been executed using the following methods: 1,257 by lethal injection, 158 by electrocution, and then after that, we're getting kind of into the fringe methods: 11 by gas chamber, 3 by hanging, and 3 by firing squad. Now we're going to take a quick look at lethal injection. Currently the primary method in use by both the states and the federal government, and specific protocol varies from state to state, involving 1 to 3 drugs in certain combinations. But they all do the same thing. They typically paralyze and stop respiration in the heart. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about death sentencing and executions, which have actually been drastically reduced as of late. They both peaked in the late 1990s, as you can see here, with the number of death sentences from 1998 on to 2015. That's a rather drastic reduction. And the same is true for the actual number of death sentences carried out. This is a graphic explaining the number of executions, and as you can see, it peaked in the late 1990s and is significantly reduced as of late. Now things, on a slightly more positive note, the number of exonerations since 1976, number 156, and as time goes on, the average number of exonerations per year actually increases, most likely due to things like increases in forensic science, certain groups who campaign to prove the innocence of people on death row, things like that. Now things are going to get kind of ugly for a few seconds. When we're talking about the death penalty, race is a factor worthy of consideration. Most people don't like talking about this, but for the sake of continuity, we have to. One of the studies conducted shows that 96% of states with reviews of race and death penalty found an identifiable pattern of race and victim discrimination, race and defendant discrimination, or both in some cases. That's 96%, so that's obviously nothing you can really discredit. And then a little bit more ugliness here. In cases of interracial murders, 31 were executed in cases of white defendant and black victim, 296 were executed in cases of black defendant and white victim. Granted, this statistic might not take into account certain factors, but just taking it based on what we see here, that's kind of disconcerting and unsettling, and definitely something to weigh when you're considering your viewpoint. Now just a basic breakdown of all the statistics associated with the death penalty and who gets put to death. Out of those put to death, 55.5% were white, 34.5% were black, 8.3% were Hispanics, and 1.7% belonged to other races. And regardless of the offender's race, if your victim was white, you are more likely to be sentenced to death. going to switch gears and talk about a cost analysis. On a per offender basis, the death penalty is extremely expensive, ranging between $1 to $3 million, which is typically, on average, more expensive than sentencing someone to life in prison without parole. This fact has prompted numerous studies, including the following, which I'm going to share with you guys. The study was conducted in California in 2011. Since 1978, the state had conducted 2,000 capital trials and executed only 13 people. Over 33 years, the system cost California taxpayers $4.6 billion, which, if you were to divide that up, it equates to roughly $308 million per execution, which obviously is way more than sentencing someone to life in prison, which averages something like 35 grand a year, last time I checked. And the trend is true for other states as well, Texas, places like that. Now, without getting too in depth, we're going to go ahead and weigh some pro and con arguments, a little bit of exposure to both sides there. First, we'll examine the pro side, those who support capital punishment. They claim that it acts as a strong deterrent for murder, is just punishment for taking an innocent life, provides justice for victims and closure for families. It's not cruel and unusual, especially when one considers the crime, and there's always a chance of a prison escape, giving the offender another shot at killing. Now we're going to move on to the con arguments. There's always a chance of an innocent person being executed. It tends to be hypocritical and cruel and unusual. It tends to be far more costly than life in prison without parole. Prison is already severe enough, and it really doesn't do enough to dissuade would-be offenders. So as I begin to wrap things up today, many of you will likely reflect on your beliefs as I have. Obviously, the death penalty is far from a cut and dry issue, and I hope if nothing else today, I have exposed you to some new information that will hopefully make you reflect on this issue, because I really, truly believe it's our responsibility as Americans to know where we stand on things like this. And I will be honest, after doing this research, I question my long-held views on the topic and now consider myself largely undecided, so chances are we're all pretty much in the same boat there. I want to thank you all for listening, and I wish you good luck on your speeches. And just as an afternote here, got my works cited, 3 pieces of literature by distinguished experts in the field of criminal justice, and again, the Death Penalty Information Center, and then I used Bing clip art for like 3 images, so I figured I'd throw that in there too. So again, thank you.